Hello everyone. Naruto Fix here, back with another amazing What If Naruto fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto never realized how many girls loved him? Part 1. If you enjoy Naruto stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the journey grow. Now let's head right into today's fanfic. Naruto Uzumaki had always believed that love announced itself loudly. In his mind, love was something obvious. Confessions shouted across rooftops, tears shed openly, promises spoken without hesitation. Love was dramatic. It demanded attention. It made itself impossible to ignore. What Naruto never understood was that the deepest feelings rarely behaved that way. They waited. After the war, Naruto's life moved forward at a pace he never questioned. The world he had fought for finally existed, and he threw himself into protecting it with the same reckless sincerity he had always shown. He trained, helped rebuild, listened to people's worries, laughed with friends, and smiled at strangers. To Naruto, it all felt natural. To others, it meant everything. Naruto never noticed how often conversations stalled when he entered a room. He never caught the way eyes followed him longer than necessary. He never realized how his presence changed the air, not because of his strength or reputation, but because of how safe he made people feel. He believed he was just being himself. And that belief was the reason he never saw the truth. Hinata Hyuga watched him from the quiet spaces. She had learned long ago how to hide her feelings behind composure and discipline. Her admiration for Naruto had matured over years of distance, battles, and survival. What once had been shy affection had deepened into something steadier, something that didn't demand to be spoken aloud. She saw Naruto smile at everyone with the same warmth, and she told herself that was enough. If he was happy, she could endure silence. What Hinata never said was that every time Naruto looked at her and smiled, a small part of her wondered what it would be like if he ever looked longer. Sakura Haruno's feelings were more complicated. She had known Naruto through his worst and best moments. She had relied on him, fought beside him, and trusted him with her life more times than she could count. Over time, that trust became something heavier. Something that didn't fit neatly into friendship anymore. But Sakura dismissed it. Naruto was Naruto. Constant. Reliable. Always there. She assumed he would always be that way. She never questioned whether his presence had quietly become something she depended on too deeply. Ino Yamanaka noticed things others didn't. She noticed how Naruto listened without interrupting. How he remembered small details people mentioned once and never repeated. How his encouragement never felt forced or performative. Naruto didn't flirt. He didn't try to impress. He simply cared. And that kind of attention lingered. Ino laughed it off at first, telling herself she was overthinking things. But every time Naruto smiled at her, not the loud grin everyone expected, but the soft, genuine one, she felt seen in a way she wasn't used to. She never said anything, because she wasn't sure when admiration had turned into something else. Temari of the Sand noticed Naruto differently. She observed him the way a strategist observed a battlefield, reading intent rather than surface action. Naruto didn't command respect through authority. He earned it through consistency. He didn't change who he was depending on who stood in front of him. That consistency was dangerous, because it made people feel chosen, even when they weren't. Temari recognized the risk immediately. Naruto did not. Naruto lived his days unaware of the emotional gravity he carried. He smiled when people thanked him. He laughed during shared meals. He listened when others spoke. He offered encouragement freely, believing kindness was harmless. He never stopped to consider what kindness could awaken in hearts that had survived loss, war, and loneliness. What Naruto failed to realize was that many of the people around him weren't looking for romance. They were looking for stability. And Naruto had become that. One evening, Naruto sat on a rooftop, watching the village lights flicker to life. He felt content, rarely lonely, rarely uncertain. He believed his life was simple. He had friends. He had purpose. He had peace. What he didn't have was awareness. Below him, several people walked the same streets with thoughts they never voiced. Hinata wondered if silence was courage or fear. Sakura questioned whether reliance had turned into attachment. Ino debated whether honesty would change anything at all. Others, quiet, unseen, held feelings they didn't know how to name. Naruto never saw any of it. Because no one asked him to. That was the irony. Naruto Uzumaki, who had spent his childhood desperate to be noticed, now lived surrounded by unspoken affection he never recognized. Not because he was blind, but because he believed love would always knock loudly. And the love surrounding him was whispering instead. Naruto Uzumaki believed peace meant quiet. Not silence, but normalcy. The kind where days passed without alarms, without blood, without the constant awareness that tomorrow might never come. He walked through the village with that belief grounding him, smiling easily, greeting people without expectation. He never noticed how often that smile stayed with him long after he had gone. Naruto's days were full, but never rushed. He trained early in the mornings, helped with village duties during the day, and spent his evenings doing what he always had, being available. People talked to him because he listened. They trusted him because he never judged. Naruto thought this was just who he was. He didn't realize how rare that was. Hinata's feelings deepened not through grand moments, but through small ones. Naruto remembered her progress in training without being reminded. He thanked her sincerely for things others overlooked. When she spoke, he listened fully, never interrupting, never rushing her words. To Naruto, it was respect. To Hinata, it was intimacy. She told herself not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Naruto was kind to everyone. Still, there were moments, brief, fragile moments, when she wondered if he ever noticed how her heart raced when he stood too close. She never asked, because asking would change everything. Sakura began to notice Naruto's absence before she noticed his presence. On days when Naruto was busy elsewhere, something felt off. Meetings felt longer. Decisions felt heavier. The ease she had grown accustomed to, the knowledge that Naruto was nearby, ready to support without being asked, was missing. That realization unsettled her. She had always believed she understood her feelings clearly. But now she wondered if familiarity had quietly grown into something deeper while she wasn't paying attention. Naruto didn't demand space in her life. He had simply filled it. Ino watched these dynamics with sharp awareness. She saw Hinata's quiet restraint. She saw Sakura's subtle frustration. She saw the way Naruto treated both of them with the same steady warmth, unaware of how each interpreted it differ. Ino had always believed in clarity. Say what you feel. Own it. Move forward. But Naruto complicated that philosophy. He didn't flirt. He didn't hint. He didn't promise. He simply was. And that constancy was harder to confront than mixed signals ever could be. Temari observed Naruto during diplomacy and noticed something that others missed. Naruto never tried to be impressive. He didn't posture. He didn't manipulate. He didn't tailor his behavior to gain favor. He stayed consistent, regardless of who stood in front of him. Temari recognized the danger in that. Consistency created trust. Trust created attachment. Attachment created expectation. Naruto never noticed the chain reaction he triggered simply by being genuine. Naruto continued his life unaware of the emotional undercurrents around him. He laughed with friends, trained with teammates, listened to worries, and offered reassurance. He believed people appreciated him as a symbol of peace, as a friend, as a protector. He never considered that some of them saw him as something more. Because no one told him. What Naruto didn't understand was that silence often came from fear, not indifference. Fear of rejection. Fear of comparison. Fear of losing what already existed. Many of the people who loved him didn't want more. They just didn't want less. One evening, Naruto found himself sitting alone at Ichiraku, watching steam rise from his ramen. He smiled contentedly, thinking how lucky he was to be surrounded by people who cared. Across the village, several people thought the same thing. They just meant something different by it. Hinata wondered if caring quietly made her invisible. Sakura wondered if she had mistaken stability for certainty. Ino wondered if waiting was strength or avoidance. Naruto wondered none of it. That was the cruel symmetry. Naruto Uzumaki, once starved for affection, now lived wrapped in it, without ever recognizing its shape. He believed love would demand his attention when it arrived. He didn't know it was already standing beside him, choosing silence over risk. Naruto Uzumaki continued living the same way he always had, open, sincere, and completely unaware of the emotional footprints he left behind. He believed that if something truly mattered, it would be said aloud. That belief shaped everything he did, and it was precisely why he never noticed what surrounded him. Because what surrounded him was quiet. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The village healed steadily, but the hearts within it healed unevenly. Naruto remained constant through all of it. He trained younger shinobi, helped mediate disputes, and showed up whenever someone needed him, never late, never half-hearted. To Naruto, this was responsibility. To others, it was devotion. Hinata's silence grew heavier with time. She no longer struggled with fear the way she once had. She could speak confidently in meetings, stand firm in battle, and look people in the eye without hesitation. Yet when it came to Naruto, that confidence faded into something fragile. She didn't fear rejection anymore. She feared change. If she spoke, something would shift, either for better or worse. If she stayed silent, at least the warmth Naruto offered would remain. Hinata told herself that being close to him, even quietly, was enough. Some nights, she almost believed it. Sakura noticed the change in herself through irritation. She found herself annoyed when Naruto wasn't around. Frustrated when decisions had to be made without his input. Unsettled when he spent time elsewhere. She scolded herself for it, reminding herself that Naruto had his own life, his own responsibilities. But logic didn't silence emotion. She had grown used to Naruto being her constant, her support without demand, her reassurance without expectation. She had never questioned it because it had always been there. Now, the thought of losing that steadiness unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Ino remained observant, but patient. She saw the patterns forming before others did. She noticed how Naruto unconsciously gravitated towards certain people when he needed quiet. How he listened more closely to some voices than others, not out of preference, but comfort. Ino understood something important. Naruto wasn't choosing anyone, but he was forming habits. And habits were often mistaken for intention. Temari saw it too. From an outsider's perspective, Naruto was a dangerous presence, not because of his power, but because of his emotional neutrality. He did not define his bonds, and in doing so, allowed others to define them for him. She respected Naruto deeply, but she also knew that emotional equilibrium never lasted forever. Something would eventually break the silence. Naruto remained blissfully unaware. He laughed easily, teased his friends, and smiled whenever someone thanked him. He believed people cared for him the way one cared for a pillar, something steady, dependable, and always there. He never considered that some people didn't see him as a pillar. They saw him as home. One afternoon, Naruto walked through the village and stopped to help a child fix a broken toy. He smiled warmly, ruffled the child's hair, and went on his way. Hinata watched from a distance. That simple act, the ease, the kindness, the absence of expectation, made her chest ache. She realized then that her feelings weren't rooted in admiration anymore. They were rooted in longing. Sakura felt a similar realization during a late-night meeting. Naruto stayed after everyone else left, helping her organize notes without being asked. He smiled, joked lightly, and left once the work was done. The room felt emptier after. That emptiness scared her. Ino noticed both moments. And she wondered, briefly, how long silence could survive before turning into regret. Naruto went to sleep that night content, believing his life was balanced. Around him, several hearts lay awake, each of them holding feelings they believed they had time to figure out. None of them realizing that time, once given too much power, had a way of forcing decisions on its own. Naruto Uzumaki remained unchanged on the surface. That was the strangest part of all. While emotions quietly deepened, while hearts struggled with silence, while expectations grew heavier with every passing day, Naruto continued to live with the same openness, the same sincerity, the same belief that if something mattered enough, it would be spoken. He did not understand that some feelings grew precisely because they were never spoken. Naruto's presence had become routine in people's lives. And routine was dangerous. Not because it was boring, but because it felt permanent. When Naruto entered a room, no one questioned why he was there. When he offered help, no one asked what he expected in return. When he smiled, people accepted it as natural, as something that would always exist. No one considered what it would feel like if it stopped. Hinata felt that fear most strongly. She began noticing how easily Naruto fit into every part of her day. Training felt lighter when he was nearby. Missions felt safer. Conversations felt easier. Even silence felt more comfortable. Naruto did not try to be close to her. He simply was. And that made the idea of distance unbearable. Some nights, Hinata wondered whether loving someone quietly was bravery, or self-denial. She told herself that Naruto's happiness mattered more than her confession. That protecting what already existed was better than risking it. But each time she made that choice, the weight on her chest grew a little heavier. Sakura experienced a different kind of unease. She had always prided herself on understanding her own emotions. But Naruto blurred those lines effortlessly. He was too familiar to be mysterious, too constant to be questioned, too supportive to be ignored. She caught herself getting irritated when Naruto relied on others instead of her. The thought surprised her, and disturbed her even more. Jealousy had crept in quietly. Not toward any single person. Toward the idea of losing her place beside him. Ino remained sharp-eyed. She noticed how Naruto's attention shifted naturally depending on the situation. He sought Hinata's calm during tense moments. Sakura's decisiveness during planning. Others' perspectives when he needed balance. Naruto didn't favor anyone. But everyone felt like he could. And that possibility was enough to stir emotions. Ino told herself she was fine waiting. But deep down, she knew waiting without direction was its own form of pain. Naruto remained oblivious. He believed things were stable. He believed everyone was comfortable. He believed peace meant people would speak when they needed something. He did not realize that many of the people around him believed the opposite. That speaking would cost them the very closeness they cherished. One evening, Naruto found himself sitting with friends, laughing easily. The moment felt warm, familiar, effortless. He looked around, content. He did not notice the way Hinata's gaze lingered just a second longer before she looked away. He did not notice Sakura's subtle tension when someone else stood a little too close to him. He did not notice Ino's thoughtful silence, her confidence masking careful observation. Naruto saw friends. They saw possibility. Naruto's kindness continued to deepen bonds without naming them. He remembered birthdays. He checked in after difficult missions. He noticed when someone seemed off and asked, genuinely, if they were okay. He believed this was normal. What he didn't understand was how rare it was to be cared for without expectation. Slowly, quietly, an imbalance formed. Naruto gave warmth freely. Others learned to depend on it. And dependency, when unnoticed, became attachment. The first crack appeared not through jealousy or confrontation, but through fear. Fear of change. Hinata hesitated before joining a mission she knew Naruto would be on. Sakura paused before assigning him elsewhere. Ino caught herself wondering what would happen if Naruto ever stopped being the constant presence she had grown used to. None of them said anything. But all of them felt it. Naruto noticed something was off, but couldn't name it. People seemed quieter around him. Conversations ended sooner. Smiles lingered less. He wondered if everyone was simply tired. He never considered himself the cause. That was the tragedy of it. Naruto Uzumaki, who had once begged the world to notice him, now lived surrounded by feelings he never recognized. Not because he didn't care, but because he believed love would always announce itself clearly. And the love surrounding him was patient. Too patient. The problem with silence was that it never stayed empty. It filled itself. Naruto Uzumaki felt that change before he understood it. Something in the air around him had shifted. Not sharply, not violently, but enough to make familiar moments feel slightly unfamiliar. He sensed it during training, during meetings, during casual conversations that ended just a bit earlier than they used to. He noticed it. He just didn't understand it. Naruto began spending more time alone without realizing why. Not because people avoided him, but because he unconsciously stepped back. Conversations felt heavier, like every word carried weight he hadn't intended. He found himself choosing solitude over company, believing everyone else simply needed space. He told himself it was normal. Peace changed people, after all. Hinata struggled with the growing distance. Naruto wasn't colder. He wasn't distant in the obvious way. But something had changed in his presence, an invisible restraint she couldn't explain. He still smiled at her, still spoke kindly, still listened. Yet it felt as if he was slowly moving behind a wall she hadn't noticed being built. She wondered if she had imagined their closeness all along. That thought hurt more than rejection ever could. Sakura felt the tension differently. She noticed Naruto leaving earlier, speaking less, staying quieter than usual. At first, she assumed he was exhausted. Then she realized something more unsettling. Naruto was being careful. That carefulness felt like loss. She missed the Naruto who spoke freely, who lingered after meetings, who joked without thinking. She wondered when she had started relying on that version of him, and why the thought of losing it added her chest ache. She didn't say anything, but the silence between them grew unfamiliar. Ino saw the pattern forming clearly now. Naruto wasn't unaware. He was misinterpreting. He believed distance would fix something he couldn't name. He believed stepping back would ease tension he didn't understand. Ino recognized that instinct well. It was the instinct of someone afraid of hurting others. But avoidance never healed emotional wounds. It only gave them time to deepen. Naruto found himself questioning things he had never questioned before. Why did people hesitate before speaking now? Why did laughter feel quieter around him? Why did moments that once felt warm now feel careful? He wondered if he had done something wrong. He couldn't remember when. One night, Naruto sat on a rooftop, staring up at the stars. He remembered a time when loneliness had been loud, when it screamed at him, demanded attention, made itself impossible to ignore. This loneliness was different. It was quiet. It came from standing among people and feeling like something invisible separated him from them. I don't get it, he whispered. And that was the truth. Hinata lay awake the same night, staring at the ceiling. She wondered if loving someone quietly meant slowly losing them. If silence protected feelings, or erased them. She had believed patience was strength. Now she wasn't sure. But she still didn't speak. Because speaking felt like a risk she wasn't ready to take. Sakura faced her reflection with frustration. She hated not knowing what she wanted. Hated that Naruto's absence, subtle as it was, affected her more than she liked. She told herself she was being irrational. But emotions didn't respond to reason. Ino grew increasingly restless. She understood something the others hadn't yet. This silence wouldn't last. Naruto's unawareness wasn't permanent. And when realization finally came, it would hurt. Because it would reveal how much had gone unsaid. Naruto continued forward, believing he was doing the right thing by giving space. He didn't realize that space, when unasked for, felt like distance. And distance, when unexplained, felt like rejection. Naruto Uzumaki began to believe that the distance he felt was his own fault. That assumption came easily to him. He had spent most of his life blaming himself for things he didn't understand. If something felt wrong, he assumed he had missed a step somewhere. If people seemed quieter, he believed he had tired them out. If warmth felt thinner, he assumed peace had simply changed how people expressed themselves. He never imagined that the distance existed because people were afraid of losing him. Naruto tried to correct what he thought was his mistake by being more present. He checked in more often. Asked how people were doing. Offered help even when it wasn't requested. He smiled a little wider, laughed a little louder, hoping to bring back the ease he remembered. Instead, the reactions grew more complicated. Hinata grew more careful, mistaking his renewed attention for something she was afraid to hope for again. Sakura felt a quiet flare of jealousy she didn't want to admit to herself. Ino noticed the shift immediately and understood that Naruto was trying to fix something he didn't understand. His kindness was genuine. That was the problem. Hinata's heart responded before her mind could stop it. Naruto's voice calling her name during training still made her pause. His encouragement still made her chest warm. But now, instead of comfort, those moments brought confusion. She had been learning how to let go, how to stand on her own feelings without expectation. Naruto's renewed closeness disrupted that fragile balance. She wondered if she had misread his earlier distance. Or worse, if she was misreading him again. Silence, once protective, now felt cruel. Sakura felt the shift with sharp clarity. Naruto was trying. That realization unsettled her more than his distance had. She saw the effort in the way he stayed longer after meetings, the way he made time to listen, the way he checked on her with the same concern he always had. It reminded her of everything she had come to rely on without questioning. She didn't want to compete. She didn't want to compare. But she couldn't ignore the way her chest tightened when someone else stood closer to him than she did. That jealousy scared her, because it meant she cared more than she had admitted. Ino watched all of this unfold with growing tension. She saw Naruto's confusion. She saw Hinata's uncertainty. She saw Sakura's restraint cracking at the edges. And she understood something painful. No one was wrong. Everyone was just afraid. Afraid to speak. Afraid to assume. Afraid to lose what little clarity they had. Naruto's unawareness wasn't ignorance. It was trust. He trusted people to speak when they needed something. They trusted silence to protect them. And those two beliefs were colliding. Naruto began to feel tired in a way training couldn't fix. Not physically, emotionally. He lay awake some nights wondering why the world felt less connected even though he was surrounded by people. He missed something he couldn't name. A sense of ease, of belonging that had once come naturally. I'm doing something wrong, he whispered into the dark. The idea stuck with him. He began replaying conversations in his mind, searching for a moment where he might have said the wrong thing, or failed to say something important. Every memory blurred into uncertainty. Nothing stood out as a clear mistake. That frightened him, because it meant the problem wasn't a single moment. It was everything unsaid. Hinata felt that tension reaching its limit. She found herself hesitating more often, before speaking, before approaching Naruto, before allowing herself to feel warmth. She was tired of interpreting every interaction through layers of fear and hope. Some nights, she wondered if loving Naruto quietly was costing her too much of herself. But she still didn't speak. Because speaking would force change. And she wasn't ready to face what that change might be. Sakura reached a similar breaking point internally. She hated not knowing where she stood. Hated that something so familiar had become uncertain. She prided herself on facing hard truths, yet here she was, avoiding one. She told herself it didn't matter. But the lie tasted bitter. Ino, for the first time, considered doing what the others wouldn't. Speaking. Not confessing. Not confronting. Just clarifying. But even she hesitated. Because clarity would shatter the fragile balance they were all clinging to. Naruto stood one evening at the edge of the village, watching people pass by, laughing softly to themselves, living lives that felt both close and distant. He felt something tightening in his chest. Not loneliness. Anticipation. As if something was approaching. Something that would force answers whether he was ready or not. The silence finally began to feel unnatural. Naruto Uzumaki couldn't explain it, but something inside him resisted the calm he had once welcomed. Peace had given everyone time to breathe, yet now it felt like people were holding their breath around him. Conversations paused too often. Smiles arrived too late. Familiar warmth carried hesitation. Naruto didn't know why. He only knew it bothered him. He started questioning himself more seriously. Had he become distant without noticing? Had his responsibilities pulled him away from the people he cared about? Had peace made him complacent? Naruto had never been subtle with his emotions. If something felt wrong, he usually knew exactly why. This time, the feeling had no shape. It followed him everywhere. Hinata felt that same tension, but for a very different reason. Naruto's attempts to be closer, his extra attention, his gentle check-ins, pulled at her heart in conflicting ways. She had been trying to let go, trying to ground herself in independence, and now he seemed to be stepping closer again without realizing the effect. Every smile felt dangerous. Every word felt loaded. She began to wonder if Naruto's kindness was keeping her stuck between hope and restraint. And she was tired of that space. Sakura noticed Hinata's unease. She didn't know the details, but she recognized the signs. Guarded posture, careful words, emotions held too tightly. Sakura felt an uncomfortable mirror forming between Hinata's struggle and her own. She wasn't immune to jealousy. She just hid it better. Sakura had always been practical, decisive, grounded. But Naruto unsettled that balance. His presence still anchored her in ways she hadn't acknowledged fully. Watching him drift between people, never intentionally, never unfairly, made her feel something she disliked. Uncertainty. Ino reached her limit internally. She had always trusted her instincts, and right now, they were screaming that this silence was doing more damage than any awkward conversation ever could. Naruto wasn't cruel. He wasn't careless. He was simply unaware. And awareness, she knew, was something that could only be given, not discovered accidentally. Still, she hesitated. Because once Naruto knew, everything would change. And change was irreversible. Naruto sensed the edge approaching. It came in the form of restlessness. He trained harder but felt less satisfied. He stayed later but felt less connected. Even laughter sounded hollow to him at times, as if he were missing the punchline to a joke everyone else understood. Odd. One night, he stood on a rooftop, fists clenched, staring out at the village. "I don't like this," he muttered. Not the quiet, not the distance, not the feeling that something important was happening just out of his reach. Naruto had never been afraid of confrontation. He was afraid of misunderstanding. He began to pay closer attention. Not just to words, but to pauses. To the way people reacted when he arrived. To how often conversations shifted when he stayed too long. To the way certain gazes lingered and then looked away. Patterns began forming. And patterns scared him. Hinata noticed Naruto watching more carefully now. His eyes lingered longer. His expressions turned thoughtful. She realized, with a mix of fear and inevitability, that Naruto was getting closer to the truth, not because someone told him, but because he could no longer ignore the emotional weight around him. Her chest tightened. If he realized, if he understood, what would happen then? Sakura felt the same tension building. She saw it in Naruto's posture, in the way he listened more intently, in how he hesitated before smiling. Something had shifted inside him. And once Naruto started asking questions, even silently, answers were never far behind. Ino recognized the moment for what it was. The calm before clarity. She understood that Naruto wouldn't stay unaware forever. He was too perceptive, too emotionally intelligent for that. The silence had stretched long enough to become noticeable even to him. What came next would not be explosive, but it would be defining. Naruto stood again at the edge of the village, breathing slowly, grounding himself. "I feel like I'm missing something important," he admitted quietly. He didn't know yet that what he was missing wasn't a single confession. It was the realization that love didn't always demand attention. Sometimes, it waited, patiently, painfully, until awareness became unavoidable. Naruto Uzumaki started noticing the patterns. That was the moment everything began to shift. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a realization forming at the edge of thought, refusing to stay ignored. He noticed how conversations subtly changed when he joined them. How laughter softened, how people straightened unconsciously, how eyes flickered toward him and then away. It wasn't discomfort. It wasn't fear. It was awareness. And Naruto didn't know why that unsettled him so deeply. For the first time, Naruto began to wonder if his presence meant more than he thought. That idea felt strange. Almost uncomfortable. He had grown up believing attention was something you fought for. Something obvious. Something loud. Yet now, surrounded by people who clearly cared, he felt an unfamiliar tension. Like standing in the center of a room where everyone knew something he didn't. Naruto hated not understanding. Hinata sensed the shift immediately. Naruto was watching more closely now. Listening not just to words, but to silences. She could feel it when his gaze lingered a second longer than before, thoughtful instead of casual. Her heart raced every time. Not with excitement, with fear. Because once Naruto noticed, things could never return to how they were. Hinata had built her strength around silence. Around patience. Around loving without expectation. But what happened when the person you loved finally realized what that silence meant? She didn't know if she was ready for that answer. Sakura noticed Naruto's awareness in a different way. He hesitated before speaking now. Chose his words more carefully. Smiled less automatically. Sakura felt a strange mix of relief and loss watching that change. Relief, because something that had felt unresolved was finally being acknowledged. Loss, because that carefree ease between them was slipping away. She realized, uncomfortably, how much she had relied on Naruto being uncomplicated. And Naruto was no longer uncomplicated. Ino watched all of this with a tight knot in her chest. She had always believed that clarity was better than comfort. That truth, even when painful, was preferable to uncertainty. But watching Naruto slowly piece things together made her hesitate. Because once Naruto understood, he wouldn't be able to unknow it. And that knowledge would force choices. Not romantic ones necessarily, but emotional ones. Boundaries, distance, redefinition. Ino wondered if anyone was truly ready for that. Naruto sat alone one evening, staring at the village lights flickering on one by one. The warmth he usually felt watching that sight didn't come as easily tonight. Instead, a question pressed against his mind, persistent and unsettling. Why do people look at me like they're waiting for something? He replayed recent interactions. Hinata's careful pauses. Sakura's quiet tension. Ino's thoughtful silences. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they formed something Naruto couldn't ignore. I'm missing something, he said softly. And for the first time, he didn't brush the thought aside. Naruto began paying attention to how people reacted after he left. He noticed how conversations didn't resume immediately. How some gazes followed him until he disappeared from view. How certain smiles faded too slowly, or too quickly. It made his chest tighten. Not because he felt proud, but because he felt responsible. Hinata felt the weight of that responsibility shifting toward Naruto, and it terrified her. She had been comfortable carrying her feelings alone. Now, it felt like those feelings were slowly becoming visible whether she wanted them to be or not. She found herself pulling back. Not from Naruto, but from hope. If he realized, she didn't want to be caught unprepared. Sakura struggled with a different fear. She worried that Naruto's realization would force her to confront feelings she wasn't ready to define. Feelings tangled with history, loyalty, and gratitude. She wasn't sure what part of her care for Naruto was romantic, and what part was simply deeply ingrained dependence. And Naruto noticing meant she would have to face that distinction. Ino understood the danger clearly now. Naruto was approaching awareness without context. And awareness without guidance could lead to misunderstanding. She considered saying something, anything, to give him a frame to understand what he was sensing. But she stopped herself. Because if Naruto truly didn't know, then the realization needed to be his. Naruto stood on a rooftop later that night, wind brushing against his face. I feel like I'm standing in the middle of something important, he whispered. For once, he didn't smile it away. He stayed with the feeling. And in doing so, Naruto Uzumaki took the first step toward understanding something that had surrounded him for a long time. Not confessions, not declarations, but quiet, persistent love, patient enough to wait, and heavy enough to change everything once seen. Naruto Uzumaki did something he had never done before. He stopped assuming. For most of his life, Naruto had moved forward on instinct. If something felt right, he trusted it. If something felt wrong, he charged straight at it until it made sense. But this quiet tension, this invisible pull surrounding him, didn't respond to instinct. So he slowed down. And slowing down changed what he could see. He began noticing not just who spoke to him, but how they did. Hinata spoke carefully now, as if measuring every word. Her confidence was real, but there was restraint in it, a hesitation that hadn't existed before. Naruto noticed how she sometimes seemed ready to say something more, only to stop herself at the last moment. He wondered why. Sakura's expressions lingered longer when he spoke. Her reactions felt sharper, more guarded, as if she were holding back thoughts she didn't want to reveal. Naruto noticed how she sometimes watched him in silence, eyes thoughtful, almost conflicted. That confused him. Ino's laughter came easily, but it didn't always reach her eyes. Naruto noticed how she observed him more than she interacted, like she was waiting for him to catch up to something she already understood. That unsettled him. Naruto didn't connect the dots yet. But he could feel them pulling closer together. He started questioning his own behavior. Had he been careless with his kindness? Had he leaned too much on being the same Naruto for everyone? Had he assumed emotional clarity where none existed? These thoughts didn't accuse him. They challenged him. And Naruto had never been good at ignoring challenges. One afternoon, Naruto found himself sitting beside Hinata after training. The silence stretched comfortably at first, but then lingered too long. "You've gotten stronger," Naruto said, smiling naturally. Hinata smiled back, but her hands clenched slightly. "Thank you." Naruto noticed the tension. Normally, he would have brushed past it. This time, he didn't. "Hey," he said gently, "did I do something wrong?" Hinata froze. Just for a second. But Naruto saw it. "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Not at all." Naruto nodded. But the answer didn't settle in his chest the way it should have. Later, he found himself replaying the moment. Not because of what Hinata said. Because of what she didn't. Naruto realized something uncomfortable. People were protecting something around him. Not secrets. Feelings. And the realization made his chest tighten. Not with excitement, but with concern. Sakura noticed Naruto's change before he said anything. He listened differently now. Asked questions instead of assuming answers. His expressions turned thoughtful instead of automatic. Sakura felt both relief and dread watching that transformation. Relief, because something unresolved was finally being acknowledged. Dread, because acknowledgement always demanded consequence. She wasn't sure she was ready for that. Ino saw it clearly now. Naruto was approaching awareness the same way he approached everything else. Honestly, earnestly, without realizing how fragile the situation truly was. He wasn't looking for romance. He was looking for understanding. And understanding would force everyone involved to confront their own truths. Naruto stood alone one evening, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. He felt different. Not confused, not overwhelmed, but alert. "I think I've been missing something important," he admitted quietly. For the first time, the thought didn't scare him. It grounded him. Naruto didn't know yet how many hearts had quietly tied themselves to his presence. He didn't know how deep those feelings ran. But he was beginning to understand that his life, his kindness, his constancy, his warmth, had meant more to others than he had ever realized. And once that understanding fully formed, it wouldn't be possible to walk forward the same way again. Naruto Uzumaki did not reach understanding all at once. It came to him in fragments. In pauses that lingered too long. In words that were chosen too carefully. In the way people's expressions shifted when they thought he wasn't looking. For someone who had grown up starved for attention, it was strange to realize that he was now surrounded by something far heavier than loneliness, unspoken attachment. And the weight of it pressed on him in ways he didn't yet know how to carry. Naruto began to feel like an outsider in his own relationships. Not because anyone pushed him away, but because he sensed that everyone was holding something back. It was like standing in a room where everyone knew the rules of a game except him. No one explained it. No one corrected him. They simply adjusted around him. That hurt more than open rejection ever could. He thought back to his childhood often during these days. Back then, emotions had been simple. People ignored him. He acted out. They noticed. Pain had been loud, obvious, easy to point at. This pain was quiet. And Naruto had never learned how to fight quiet things. Hinata felt the pressure of Naruto's growing awareness like a tightening thread. She noticed the way his gaze lingered longer now, not curious, but searching. She noticed how his questions carried more care, how he listened as if trying to understand something beneath her words. That frightened her. Because if Naruto truly understood her feelings, She wouldn't be able to hide behind silence anymore. She had lived for years loving him quietly, believing that as long as nothing changed, she could endure. But change was approaching now, slow, inevitable. And Hinata wasn't sure whether she hoped for it or feared it. Sakura felt torn between instinct and logic. Part of her wanted Naruto to realize everything, wanted the tension named, the uncertainty cleared, the weight lifted. Another part of her feared what would happen once things were spoken aloud. Because Sakura didn't know what she wanted yet. She only knew that Naruto mattered more to her than she had ever admitted. And admitting that would change her world. Ino stood at the edge of the situation, watching the slow collapse of silence with sharp eyes. She had always believed that emotions should be confronted head-on. But this wasn't something that could be rushed. Naruto's realization wasn't just about love. It was about responsibility. Once he understood how many hearts were quietly tied to him, he would carry that knowledge forever. Ino wondered if Naruto was ready for that burden. She wasn't sure anyone ever was. Naruto began pulling threads together without meaning to. He remembered moments that once felt insignificant. How Hinata always seemed calmer when he was nearby. How Sakura's frustration sharpened when he pulled away. How Ino's confidence softened around him in ways it didn't with others. Individually, those moments meant nothing. Together, they formed a picture Naruto couldn't ignore anymore. One evening, Naruto found himself sitting alone, hands resting on his knees, breathing slowly. "I've been stupid," he said quietly. Not cruel, not careless, just unaware. And awareness, once it began, spread quickly. He realized something painful. People hadn't stayed silent because they didn't care. They had stayed silent because they cared too much. Too much to risk rejection. Too much to disturb what already existed. Too much to ask for more when they feared losing everything. That realization made Naruto's chest ache. Naruto had always believed that honesty solved problems. Now he understood that honesty could also create them. And that scared him. Because once he acknowledged what he was beginning to see, he wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. His words would matter more. His actions would carry heavier meaning. His kindness would no longer be neutral. Naruto had never wanted power over hearts. But he was beginning to realize he had it anyway. Hinata sensed the shift the moment Naruto grew quiet around her. Not distant. Thoughtful. That change unsettled her more than any confession ever could. Because it meant Naruto was seeing something he hadn't seen before. And once he saw it, silence would no longer protect anyone. Sakura felt that same tension coil in her chest. She caught Naruto watching her during a meeting, expression unreadable. Not smiling. Not joking. Just present in a way that felt deliberate. Her heart raced. Not with excitement, but with fear of what that attention implied. Ino exhaled slowly when she noticed Naruto standing alone more often. He was thinking. That was dangerous. Because Naruto Uzumaki never thought this deeply unless something truly mattered. Naruto stood one night beneath the open sky, stars stretching endlessly above him. "I think," he whispered, "people see me differently than I thought." The words felt heavy, but also honest. For the first time, Naruto didn't brush the realization aside. He accepted it. And in doing so, he crossed a line he could never uncross. Naruto Uzumaki stood alone, staring at a truth he could no longer turn away from. Not a confession. Not a declaration. Not a dramatic moment that demanded an answer. But an understanding. He finally saw what silence had been protecting. And what it had been hiding. Naruto realized that love did not always arrive with courage. Sometimes it arrived with restraint. With people choosing to stay instead of speak. With hearts deciding that closeness was safer than clarity. With feelings buried not out of fear, but out of care. And Naruto understood, perhaps for the first time, that his kindness had never been neutral. It had been felt. Deeply. He thought of Hinata's quiet strength, of how her presence had always steadied him without asking for anything in return. He thought of Sakura's constant reliance, the way she had trusted him without ever questioning whether he would be there. He thought of Ino's watchful patience, her confidence masking an awareness sharper than anyone else's. And he understood that none of it had been accidental. None of it had been meaningless. Naruto felt no triumph in this realization. Only responsibility. Because knowing meant he could no longer move carelessly. Knowing meant every word would matter. Knowing meant every smile would carry weight. He had spent his childhood desperate to be seen. Now, he stood surrounded by feelings that had seen him long before he ever noticed them. Naruto took a slow breath. He didn't choose anyone. He didn't speak any names. He simply accepted the truth. That he had been loved quietly, patiently, and sincerely, by more people than he had ever imagined. And that realization alone changed him. This chapter of Naruto's life did not end with romance. It ended with awareness. Awareness of the hearts around him. Awareness of his own impact. Awareness that love, when unspoken, still shapes destinies. What came next would require courage. Not from those who loved him, but from Naruto himself. Because once love was seen, it could never be unseen. Thank you.